Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, I have a story that's gonna blow your mind. It's not just about practicing your English. It's about learning how determination and hard work can overcome even the toughest challenges. The story is called Nothing is Free, and trust me, it's not just inspiring. It's going to show you what's possible when you never give up. Let's jump right in. Jake was just 20 years old, living in a small, quiet town surrounded by mountains. His town wasn't much, just a few streets, some small shops, and a lot of hardworking people who barely got by. Jake's family was one of them. His dad, Mike, was a mechanic who worked long hours but barely made enough to cover the bills. His mom, Sarah, cleaned houses for a living, often coming home late and exhausted. And then there was his little sister, Emma, just 10 years old. Emma looked up to Jake like he was the greatest person in the world. But Jake didn't feel like a hero, he felt stuck. Jake had a dream, a big one. He wanted to own a chain of restaurants, to be a successful entrepreneur, and, most importantly, to give his family a better life. But sitting in their tiny, rundown house, it felt impossible. One cold evening, Jake sat on the front steps of their house, staring at the stars. The wind was icy, but he didn't care. His mind was racing. He whispered to himself, "I want to change everything for my family. I want Emma to grow up proud of me. But where do I even start?" The next morning, over breakfast, Jake decided to share his dream with his dad. "Dad, I want to do something big. I want to own my own business someday and make life better for all of us." Mike put down his coffee and looked at Jake seriously. "Jake, dreams aren't free. If you want something, you've got to fight for it. No one's going to hand you anything. Start small. Use what you've got." Those words stayed with Jake all day. He kept thinking, start small. Use what I've got. But what did he have? He didn't have money, experience, or connections. As he walked through town later that day, Jake noticed something. People in his town loved fresh bread, but the nearest bakery was miles away. It hit him, what if he could bring fresh bread to the people here? The idea sounded great, but there was one massive problem. Jake didn't have any money to buy bread to sell. Still, he wasn't ready to give up. He decided to take a risk and walked all the way to the next town to talk to the bakery owner, Mr. Brown. Now, Mr. Brown was known for being tough. He rarely smiled, and people said he didn't trust anyone. But Jake had no choice. He stepped into the bakery and said, "Mr. Brown, I want to sell your bread in my town, but I don't have money to pay up front. Can you trust me for 1 week? I'll sell the bread, bring your money back, and keep a small profit." Mr. Brown raised an eyebrow. "Why should I trust you? You're just a kid." Jake stood tall and said, "Because I'm determined. I'll work harder than anyone else to prove myself." After a long pause, Mr. Brown finally said, "Fine, 1 week. But if you don't pay me back, don't bother coming here again." Jake's heart raced with excitement. Early the next morning, he carried a heavy basket of bread back to his town and set up a small stand near the park. He greeted everyone with a big smile, saying, "Fresh bread. Warm and delicious." At first, people walked by without stopping. Some looked skeptical while others ignored him completely. But Jake didn't give up. He started offering free samples, saying, "Try a piece. You'll love it." Slowly, people started to trust him. By the end of the day, Jake had sold every single loaf of bread and made a small profit. That evening, he walked all the way back to Mr. Brown's bakery and handed over the money. Mr. Brown nodded. "You kept your word. Come back tomorrow." From that day on, Jake worked tirelessly. Every morning, he woke up at 4 a.m., walked miles to the bakery, carried bread back to town, and sold it with enthusiasm. After 2 months, Jake had saved enough money to buy a small cart. This made transporting the bread easier and allowed him to carry more. But just as Jake's business was growing, a new challenge appeared. A young man named Eric opened a fancy bakery right in the center of town. Eric's shop was big, flashy, and full of colorful signs. People flocked to it out of curiosity, and Jake's sales started dropping fast. For the first time, Jake felt real fear. "What if this is the end for me?" he thought. But instead of giving up, Jake got to work. He went around town and started asking his customers, "What do you like about Eric's bakery? What can I do better?" Some people said, "Eric's shop looks amazing. It's clean and modern." Others said, "His cakes are beautifully decorated." Jake realized he needed to step up his game. Using his savings, he painted his cart and added bright decorations to make it more attractive. He also went to the library and started watching videos to learn how to decorate cakes. Slowly but surely, customers began coming back to Jake. His improved cart, new cake designs, and friendly personality won them over. One evening, Jake's mom, Sarah, sat down with him and said, "Jake, you've come so far, but have you ever thought about baking your own bread instead of buying it from Mr. Brown? You'd make more profit that way." Jake froze. The idea was exciting but also terrifying. He had never baked anything in his life. Still, he knew his mom was right. The next morning, after paying for his bread, Jake turned to Mr. Brown and said, "Mr. Brown, can you teach me how to bake?" The old man frowned. "Why would I teach you? If you bake your own bread, you won't need me anymore." Jake smiled and said, "You're right, but I'll never forget the man who gave me my first chance. If I succeed, I'll make sure to help your bakery too." Mr. Brown thought for a moment and finally said, "Fine, but baking isn't easy. It takes time, patience, and hard work. If you're ready for that, I'll teach you." Jake's lessons started the next day at 3 a.m. Mr. Brown showed him how to mix flour, knead dough, and bake bread perfectly. First, Jake struggled. His hands hurt from kneading, and his bread came out too hard or too soft. One day, after ruining yet another batch of bread, Jake felt like giving up. "Maybe I'm not good enough for this," he thought. But then he remembered his dad's words, "Dreams aren't free." With renewed determination, Jake kept practicing. After 2 weeks, he finally baked a perfect loaf. Mr. Brown smiled and said, "You're ready." Jake was thrilled. He rented a small oven and started baking bread at home. His family jumped in to help. Emma packed the bread, and Sarah made tea to keep Jake going through late nights. Soon, Jake expanded his menu to include cookies, pastries, and cakes. But life wasn't done testing Jake. One stormy night, as Jake was closing his bakery, he noticed smoke coming from the back. His heart dropped. Rushing inside, he saw flames near the oven. Jake grabbed buckets of water and managed to stop the fire, but most of his equipment was ruined. The next day, whispers spread through town. Maybe this is it for Jake, people said. Standing outside his damaged bakery, Jake felt the weight of everything. But instead of giving up, he took a deep breath and said, "This is just another challenge. I've started with nothing before. I can do it again." Jake asked for help. Some townsfolk donated ingredients, others gave small amounts of money, and a few helped clean up the mess. With their support, Jake began baking again, using whatever little equipment he had left. After months of hard work, Jake reopened his bakery. This time it was better than ever. He added new decorations and introduced cupcakes, muffins, and more. On the grand reopening day, the mayor of the town came by and said, "Jake, you've shown us all what true determination looks like. You're an inspiration." Standing in front of the crowd, Jake smiled and said, "Thank you. This journey has taught me something important. Nothing in life is free. Not success, not respect, not love. But if you work hard and never give up, everything is possible." From then on, Jake's fresh bakes became a symbol of hope. People from other towns came just to meet the young man who never gave up. So whatever your dream is, don't stop chasing it. Remember, nothing is free, but everything is possible. Questions and answers. Who is the main character of the story? The main character of the story is Jake. How old is Jake? Jake is 20 years old. Where does Jake live? Jake lives in a small town surrounded by mountains. What does Jake dream of becoming? Jake dreams of becoming a successful entrepreneur with a chain of restaurants. What does Jake's dad, Mike, do for a living? Jake's dad, Mike, works as a mechanic. What does Jake's mom, Sarah, do? Jake's mom, Sarah, works as a house cleaner. How old is Jake's little sister, Emma? Jake's little sister, Emma, is 10 years old. What does Jake want to achieve for his family? Jake wants to give his family a better life. What advice does Jake's dad give him about his dreams? Jake's dad advises him that dreams aren't free, and if he wants something, he has to fight for it by starting small and using what he has. What idea does Jake come up with to start his business? Jake comes up with the idea to sell fresh bread in his town. Why does Jake approach Mr. Brown? Jake approaches Mr. Brown to ask if he can provide bread for Jake to sell, as Jake doesn't have money to buy it up front. What is Mr. Brown's response when Jake asks for bread? Mr. Brown agrees to give Jake bread for 1 week but warns him that if he doesn't pay back the money, he should not return. How does Jake sell the bread at first? Jake sells the bread by setting up a small stand near the park and offering free samples to attract customers. How does Jake's first day of selling bread go? Jake's first day of selling bread goes well, as he sells all the bread and makes a small profit. What does Jake do after his first successful day? After his first successful day, Jake goes back to Mr. Brown to repay the money and get more bread to sell. What time does Jake wake up every morning to work? Jake wakes up at 4 a.m. every morning to work. How does Jake expand his bread business after 2 months? After 2 months, Jake expands his bread business by saving enough money to buy a small cart, which makes it easier to transport more bread. Who opens a new bakery in town? A young man named Eric opens a new bakery in town. What challenges does Eric's bakery create for Jake? Eric's bakery creates challenges for Jake by attracting customers with a fancy shop and colorful signs, causing Jake's sales to drop. How does Jake respond to the competition from Eric's bakery? Jake responds to the competition by asking customers for feedback, improving his cart, and learning how to decorate cakes. Who suggests that Jake should bake his own bread? Jake's mom, Sarah, suggests that he should bake his own bread to increase his profit. What does Jake ask Mr. Brown to do? Jake asks Mr. Brown to teach him how to bake. How does Mr. Brown react when Jake asks to learn baking? Mr. Brown hesitates at first but eventually agrees to teach Jake how to bake. What time does Jake start his baking lessons? Jake starts his baking lessons at 3 a.m. What challenges does Jake face while learning to bake? Jake faces challenges such as his hands hurting from kneading dough and his bread often turning out too hard or too soft. What keeps Jake motivated despite his struggles with baking? Jake stays motivated by remembering his dad's advice that dreams aren't free. How long does it take Jake to bake a perfect loaf of bread? Takes Jake 2 weeks to bake a perfect loaf of bread. What does Jake do after learning to bake? After learning to bake, Jake rents a small oven and starts baking bread at home. How does Jake's family help with the bakery? Jake's family helps with the bakery by having Emma pack the bread and Sarah make tea to keep Jake energized during late nights. What additional products does Jake start making? Jake starts making additional products such as cookies, pastries, and cakes. What disaster strikes Jake's bakery? A fire breaks out in Jake's bakery, damaging most of his equipment. How does Jake react to the fire? Jake reacts to the fire by remaining determined and vowing to rebuild his bakery. How do the townsfolk support Jake after the fire? The townsfolk support Jake by donating ingredients, offering small amounts of money, and helping him clean up the bakery. How does Jake rebuild his bakery? Jake rebuilds his bakery by using the community's support, working hard, and introducing new products. What does the mayor say about Jake on the reopening day? The mayor says that Jake has shown everyone what true determination looks like and that he is an inspiration. What does Jake say during the reopening? During the reopening, Jake says that his journey has taught him that nothing in life is free. Not success, respect, or love, but with hard work and perseverance, everything is possible. What does Jake's bakery become a symbol of? Jake's bakery becomes a symbol of hope and resilience. Where do people come from to visit Jake's bakery? People come from other towns to visit Jake's bakery. What lesson does Jake's story teach about dreams? Jake's story teaches that dreams aren't free and require hard work and determination. What is the main takeaway from Jake's journey? The main takeaway from Jake's journey is that nothing is free, but everything is possible with hard work and persistence. And that's the story of Jake, an ordinary young man with extraordinary determination. Jake's journey reminds us of some powerful lessons. Dreams aren't free. If you want something, you have to work for it. Success, respect, and even love must be earned. Failure is not the end. Every setback is an opportunity to learn, grow, and come back stronger. Start small and never stop improving. Jake didn't wait for the perfect moment or perfect resources. He began with what he had and kept pushing forward. Help yourself and others will support you. People admire resilience and are willing to help those who don't give up. If Jake could turn his small idea into a thriving business by staying committed, you can achieve your dreams too. No matter how tough things get, keep going. Because, as Jake learned, nothing in life is free, but everything is possible with hard work and persistence. So, what's your dream? What steps are you going to take to make it a reality? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories and lessons. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.